What are Redditor's views on prostitution? I have no problem with workers. It's the pimps and traffickers I have a problem with. Work should be legal, regulated, and workers should be able to safely call the cops if there's a problem. Making the industry illegal solves nothing and serves no purpose in society. As far as I know, some people call it the first profession ever. It's hard to tell the accuracy of such statement, but it does inform about one thing: it has existed since forever. Another thing is, by making it illegal, some desperate people are taken advantage of, don't get a proper medical care, and risk with their lives to feed themselves or their families. What is more, it's not always that workers get hired for. Sometimes people hire them so they would have a shoulder to cry on, since they have nobody to chat to help with something. In fact, there have been studies in which many workers admitted that a large portion of their clients have hired them for such reasons, to the point that some of them see themselves as unlicensed psychologists and therapists. I've been saying to regulate work. It's just gonna happen, people. Since the dawn of time, prostitution has been a thing. Let them become a legit business and regulate and taxed. Without that, then workers are victims of abuse and manipulation. Also, with regulations, it would be a lot safer because more of them would have to get tested, and thus less disease spread through the community. And I mean all communities. There is no community where everyone is a saint, and no one has had with a worker. Pimps provide a very needed service to the, not to mention security in case the gets into trouble or has a client who refuses to pay or abuses her. A pimp is the difference between a common whore and a classy. The difference between an amateur and a professional business associate ready to conduct a transaction between client and. How's it gonna get money if some dude rolls up on her and has a knife or something and demands free service? That is what the pimp is for, to go back there, find the dude and get that motherfucking money he owe back. I spoke to an ex-prostitute who worked in Amsterdam legally in the red light district. I was interested to hear that even though it is legal and they have a measure of protection by police, a large majority of the girls still have pimps. Most are usually from organized East European or African gangs who have paid for them to set up shop. Others pay to use local gang members for protection against general abuse, obsessed clients, or when they are paying house visits to clients. You mean just like drugs? But then how will our precious government make money from exploiting the problem instead of fixing it? Legalization makes too much sense, and will lose too much money for our corrupt government to consider it. We need our police officers out there confiscating Ziploc baggies of weed and shooting black people and family pets for no reason. They can't be wasting their time going after traffickers and saving children from getting molested. That would be a ridiculous waste of taxpayer dollars. This is fine, and I definitely don't think anyone should be punished for doing it, the workers or the clients, not necessarily illicit owners of an abusive industry, but in the USA, at least especially, there's already little to no protection for workers being overworked, underpaid, given no ownership of their profits, and not allowed to unionize. When you add that, plus the added potential abuse that comes with work, this is heavily documented. In theory, it's fine. In principle, think for safety and protection, we have a lot of other barriers to overcome first. It's a tiny percentage of people in the industry who willingly and safely choose and enjoy their job. Everyone else is various shades of gray: addiction, poverty, exploitation, slavery, desperation. Selling your body makes you so incredibly vulnerable. All I feel is desperately sad for anyone who ends up in the industry. Every documentary I've watched has reinforced that girls go into the industry thinking they are in control, and it's so quickly apparent that they are not. I would never date a guy who paid for. Not because I have a problem with workers, but because for me, buying someone's body to play out your fantasies and come into is fucking grim. Brothels should be legal everywhere so people can provide the service in a controlled and safe environment with healthcare. People are going to, and oftentimes need to, do it anyways. It's like that old trope: weed should be illegal, it's a gateway drug. Well, maybe it is, but only because society demonized it for so long, and when a kid tries it and spends the evening just laughing at everything, it makes you think society has been lying to you. This isn't so bad at all. Maybe they were also lying about this other drug. And if it's illegal, then by definition, you need criminal connections to get it, and on the story goes. Alcohol could be just as much of a gateway drug were the roles reversed. But in any case, these things need to be legal and controlled for the reasons you state. And also, so we don't push people into crime who would not be criminals otherwise. Even if you think it's a bad life choice to drink, or smoke, or pay for, fine, then don't do it yourself. But people should be free to make their own decisions, even bad ones. Men and women feel differently about the cost of prostitution on the mental health of women is enormous. In addition, a huge majority had been molested and abused as children. Most prostitutes dissociate during to deal with the trauma. I would like to think I could cut my mind loose, let it drift to a tropical island while my body went through the motions, protect the part that is me. But there is a reason we use the word intimate. Cuts closer to our core than any other physical act. It can rip away the garb and the fad, break through the boundaries, ease loneliness, soothe anxiety, restore a sense of self. Even its biochemistry is rigged to emotion, to tenderness. Oxytocin floods us after orgasm. I don't think legalizing will make it safer. There are a lot of counties where it's legal and women and children are still forced into it. If anything, legalizing will give more power to pimps who want to exploit vulnerable women and children. There is a small percentage of women who do it because they want to. The rest are doing it out of necessity, fear, addiction, or exploitation. Legalizing it won't solve the core issues, which is mostly poverty and lack of access to resources like shelter, food, education, and support for mental health. Time to get some H8. I'm not really a fan. Hold up, listen up. If you're a worker, you do you. I'm some rondo on the internet whose opinion is basically not even worth 2 cents of bandwidth. If you're making bank selling, make that bank. You're one of the rare few that has escaped pimps, abuse, addiction, and trafficking. You won the work lottery. Enjoy it. My issue with prostitution is not personal but theoretical. Well, part of it is all of the above: the human trafficking, pimps, abuse, etc. Read an article that said lately the hot new trend in trafficking is trans teens, which just broke my heart. But also, I worry about the implications of work. I've had male buddies former military, so no. We talk about everything who basically have come to view women as fleshlights with a pulse. When they are thinking solely of getting their rocks off. They are not worried or even thinking about their partner's pleasure, or, in some cases, even their physical comfort. They have a kink they want to do, and they want to do it, and think that consent is for losers. If a girl does anal, they want her 3-hole qualified stick the penis in all 3 orifices, which is, objectifying and reductive, and if she doesn't, she's a stuck-up. There's literally no winning. When guys have most of their with prostitutes or workers, they seem to come to this idea. I asked about if they ever got their female partners off and got answers like, who cares, and, the female orgasm is a myth, and overconfident yeses, and all women fake orgasms. It's not really hard for me to connect some dots here. And of course, you are reading this and saying, what the fav? Are all your Thai male friends Andrew Tate fanboys? Possibly, most of us haven't talked in years, but the point remains: even if only the Andrew Tate fanboy contingent utilize work and it reinforces their Thai narcissistic and misogynistic views on, isn't that bad enough? As an ex-prostitute, I have no problem with work itself. It's how unsafe and unregulated it is that I'm against. I saw so many children being trafficked while I was working and watched so many people get into horrible situations because of how shameful it is to speak up on it, and because of how unregulated it is. If it was legal or at least decriminalized and regulated, I probably wouldn't have even been on the streets at all, at least not at the age I was. I was 12 when I started and 17 when I stopped. So very, very young. And I would have had resources to help me with the problems I was having that caused me to be out there in the first place. The same goes for 90% of the other people I worked with. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, as long as it's regulated, safe, everyone is a consenting adult and resources are given to help people who may be struggling, then it's perfectly fine. If it's not, then don't support it at all. It's legal where I live. Workers have much better rights and protections, and if they are mistreated, they can seek help from law enforcement and health agencies without fear of repercussion. There are professional organizations which help keep them and their clients safe and well educated. Overall, the industry is safer, cleaner, and less sleazy. As far as I'm concerned, it's a no-lose situation. We still have problems with trafficking and bad people taking advantage of others, but it's much better than when it was illegal. There were of course plenty of people against it when the law changed, but the world hasn't ended, and everyone has just gotten over it. I think even naysayers have seen the advantages, like keeping work in private brothels, hotel rooms, etc., rather than on the streets, and lowering levels of STIs. I mean, sure, it's work. Getting it legalized would fight back a lot of trafficking happening and any extreme exploitation. But we live under capitalism, so those workers would still get exploited, and you have richish holes getting richer from the labor of prostitutes. It just becomes legal exploitation. So the relationship doesn't change in any meaningful way. It only softens the blows of being in such a service industry and makes just that less exploitive. But my main problem of prostitution is that it is institutionalized rape. It's literally saying, either you have with me or become homeless and starve. It's the same as any other work, either work for the big boss and his profits or be homeless and starve. In the end, it's not a choice. It's an ultimatum. The difference is for most other jobs you use your labor being treated as a commodity for profits of others' property owners, while in prostitution you use your most intimate body as a commodity for the profits of the same property owners. Unless you're independent, it's not going to be pretty. So yeah, even if it's legal, there will still be the same problems, but just soften the issues for a time. The thing about prostitution is the fact that it's a lucrative business that very few people want to do, so they force people to do it. Prostitution is an incredibly mentally and emotionally demanding job. It ruins women's lives all the time. People often say if you legalize it, it'll become safer or healthier, but it is inherently demeaning and painful to most people. Some people can be prostitutes and be fine. Most cannot. And legalizing it probably wouldn't make it safer at all. Why do you think cartels aren't shooting up weed nurseries? Because it's overall better for business when there's a chance what you're doing could be legal. Gives people less motive to investigate. You see this in nations with red light districts all the time. There are so many girls, even in the USA, being lost to human trafficking. And for what? You'll gratification. So many lives lost for something as stupid as you'll gratification. Even if there is safe work, that's the exception to the rule. Might catch some flack with this, but I think it should be discouraged. Legal? Sure. But I am of the opinion that the normalization of work is bad for individual people and society. It's not about shaming workers. It's about preventing further social isolation through the commodification of. We will all be the worse for it in the long term. It really seems impossible to make it anything other than exploitative. That may not be true in every case, but it doesn't seem like any amount of legalization or normalization resolves those issues. Beyond that, it doesn't seem to be emotionally healthy for the customers. We're evolved or designed to connect emotion, and in complex ways, and prostitution, as a general rule, reinforces a disconnect between them, which I don't believe to be healthy for many, if any, individuals, and does not bode well in aggregate for society. I think it reinforces social ills like misogyny, and in practice, even racism. Not everybody will agree, especially here on the internet, but that's my view. Why should women not take advantage of the fact that a large number of men prioritize having so much that they'll often pay very well for it? It should be legalized and regulated for safety and health. Australia is a good example of legalization dropping STI spread, violence against worker rates, and unnecessary incarcerations, and the costs therein for two people consensually having just because money was involved. It would be fantastic if it's regulated, like everything in life. Security, insurance, money. This would mean the workers can safely perform their jobs and go home. Besides, they are also hired by people who just want to talk. One of the best ways to get human connection and boost morale. For people who need it. For gals who don't understand basic UL activities, this will help them out with their curiosities too, and better understand their UL nature. This industry would also help people curb their nasty UL tendencies, which may result in assaults. Absolute game changer in my opinion. It is one of the oldest professions on earth, so why make it illegal? People get on their moral or religious high horse about it, but remember, predominantly historically religious beliefs cause the vast majority of all wars. Religious people have for all time been corrupt, immoral, abusers of human life. The Catholic Church has abused humans from birth to adulthood, and everything in between. Prostitution never caused a war like religion. Prostitution, if it is a choice, not forced, etc., is a good way to make money. It's a service industry men and women want, but not a partner or a specific kink that needs to be satisfied. Why not get what you want when you want it? Work only exists because of how faffed up our world is. Nobody should ever have to consider selling themselves. I can't feel negative towards workers. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But we need to eventually eliminate it from society. We can't just get rid of it immediately. People need jobs, but ideally get rid of it ASAP. Prostitution, as long as it's done at free will, should be legal, especially because it's between two consenting adults making a fair trade. Who I feel sorry for is women who have after the club with guys who don't care for them, and they don't charge them. It must feel dumb to have with a guy who doesn't like or respect you for free, when guys pay women hundreds who they don't like nor respect for. Food for thought. Work is work. I believe that, and I support people who wish to provide that service. I do feel the weird complicated guilt though, upon thinking about it as work. See, we have words for coerced, bad words, criminal words in fact. A lot of people flag that since a worker is doing it to survive, then it's kind of gross to use or support services as it's coerced labor. I think there is a truth here, but it's deeper than that. All work is coerced and gross. We all must, under penalty of starvation and homelessness, work whether we wish to or not. Thus, it's not that work is uniquely coerced, but that work is uniquely discussed, due to the relationship of consent, granting us a lens to see modern labor relations in a capitalist system differently, to see them as non-consensual. However, this creates the choice. Either coercion and threats of economic and systemic violence are uniquely unethical or immoral when discussing, meaning it's fine to force people to do other things, or it's that being coerced at all is unethical. Now, call me crazy, but while I think forcing someone into work is worse than forcing them to work in McDonald's, both are still bad. The moral dilemma of forced labor is the same. So then, how do we remove the coercive elements? How can work be consensual and not forced like this? It's through things like UBI, socialism, or more or less giving everyone a basic quality of life, that we lessen that gross coercive aspect present in all work. Because if we are choosing to only forego luxury, but not our essentials like housing and food, then we are no longer forced to labor in order to survive. So I'm pro-work, anti-capitalism. I long for the day that a worker does it completely by their own free will, with no pressure, and loves their work. And if that is a fantasy, and no man or woman would do that, then work can fade away. However, I personally think some people would do work by choice in a very different society. If it's a consenting adult, then it's providing a service, no different than a massage or stripper, when done in a controlled manner, whether brothel with guidelines and codes, or an entrepreneur doing it on their own. Prostitution is a job with a guaranteed clientele. The safety aspect is another issue, which is why it should be legalized and accepted, because that would cut down on people getting taken advantage, forced into it, or clients who think they can do anything they want. Plus, people who provide it wouldn't feel the need to hide or be underground, which is where most of the issues lie. A lot of men like it, and think it's okay to pay to have access to a woman who would not have given consent to faff them if money wasn't being used as a form of coercion. Other men are some kind of religious, and think outside of marriage sends you to hell. An unfortunate group of women are brainwashed enough to think it's empowering. Funny how they think empowerment comes from men being able to buy, rent their bodies, and consent. The rest of us see it for what it is: paid rape, abuse, a direct product of misogyny, and one of the biggest reasons for human trafficking. I kind of see it the way I see drugs should be legal, and should be regulated for the safety of all parties involved. That said, I don't think it's the healthiest behavior to engage in for any parties involved. The psychological toll of selling yourself in that way for money is well documented, and that goes beyond just results of stigma and illegality. On the other side of it, I think that it only enhances the male perspective that female-wality is a commodity that can be bought, and reinforces the view of women as objects. Maybe it shouldn't, and in an ideal world, it wouldn't, but I believe it does. I also think it cheapens in general. I also know some men use it for company, or to have someone to talk to, etc., etc. I am of the opinion that it would be more healthy for them to develop in whatever areas they are lacking that make it difficult for them to do that. Organical. I think I'm probably the rare modern feminist who opposes legalizing prostitution. My opposition is not about the morality of the matter. Morally, people should be able to extract whatever value they can from their bodies in any way they choose, barring harm to another. Harming none. Do as thou wilt. For me, it's the economics. To commoditize the human body is deeply problematic, especially because it almost always young women's bodies. To literally put a dollar price on female bodies is repugnant to human dignity. First, okay, lied. There's a bit of moralizing her. It isn't the part that is demeaning, it's the money part. Free will is one thing. Free choice is one thing. Money is a way that we convince people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. And that means that every act of prostitution is coerced. To some degree, from a little to a lot. To solicit from someone with money who wouldn't have with you otherwise is to coerce them. And that coercion is most available and most effective on those who have the least. The poorer one is, the less access one has to money, the more powerful the dollar can become. So legalized prostitution isn't a thing that affects everyone. By and large, it will be a market of young, poor, female bodies, all to a degree being coerced into from richer, older, more powerful men. And yes, I know, we all do work we don't want to do, but work is uniquely dangerous, uniquely intimate, uniquely prone to power dynamics and abuse. I also think that it reinforces the hierarchy I wish didn't exist, that attractive people are worth more than unattractive people. I think that putting a dollar amount on how much more attractive a person is than another is specifically harmful. Practically, I believe the correct law would be to prosecute pimps, johns, and traffickers, and decriminalize the act of providing mule services. Provide women in the industry with safeguards and the ability to report abusers and bad actors without fear of prosecution themselves.